Hey everybody, it's Rebecca Goldfarb and Lou, and today I'm so excited to introduce my friend Galia, who is a business attorney. We have clients who are either thinking about starting a business or who already have one, so you're in for a treat. We get to pick her brain today and learn a lot of new stuff. So Galia, can you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I'm super excited to be sitting here talking to you about this, Rebecca. So my name is Galia Aharoni Schmidt. I am the owner and founder of a business law firm based out of Oakland, California, where we work with, called Aharoni Business Law, where we work with businesses of all types and sizes. And so we sort of function as what we call outside in-house counsel, kind of anything that comes up in the course of a business, whether that's starting a business, buying or selling a business, contracts, hiring your first employees, trademarking, all of those things we can help with. And we represent people throughout the state of California.
Very good. So for clients who have some sort of a business, what type should they be?
So that is the number one question that we get from people. So I can dig into that a little bit. There are a ton of different types of business entity that you can create. And it's the first and maybe most important business decision you can make when you're starting a new business. So there are a ton to choose from. I listed a few on the slide here, but the most common that we see around California are sole proprietorships, LLCs, which is limited liability companies, and corporations of different kinds. And so that's kind of question number one. We sort out with people when they come to us is what type of business should they be? So the first question we usually ask people is whether they need limited liability. So what is limited liability and how can someone tell whether they need it? So it's easier to start off by saying what happens when you don't have limited liability. So let's say you just start a sole proprietorship. You just start, selling something on Etsy or something like that, or start up a business individually, and you don't do anything and file anything with the state. So if something happened and your business got sued, the person suing you can come after all of your personal assets too. So whatever you have in the bank, or if you own a house, or if you have assets that you share with your spouse, all of those assets are theoretically up for grabs in a lawsuit. And that's not a good thing for obvious reasons. So certain entities like LLCs or corporations give you what's called limited liability. So when you have limited liability, if the business gets sued, the person suing you can only come after the assets of the business and not your personal assets. So in order to figure out whether somebody even needs that to begin with, there are three questions we start with. We ask, first of all, what is the potential liability even for the business that you run? So for example, if someone's just starting a single person web developing company or a web design company, and they're just going to be sitting at home in their pajamas all day designing websites for people, not that that's easy, but the risk of lawsuits is very low, because what's going to go wrong? Nobody's going to get injured or killed. And so probably worst case scenario is some sort of contract dispute, something like that. So the risk of lawsuit is really low versus maybe a restaurant or a store where people are walking in and they can slip and fall and hurt themselves, or you have an employee who can sue you for employment law breaches, things like that. The risk is much, much higher. And if you do get sued, the amount that you'll get sued for is also a lot higher. So that's kind of question one. What's the risk? The higher the risk, the more likely we're going to recommend having limited liability. So
yeah. And I just wanted to interrupt for a second and say, as lawyers, we know a lot of personal injury lawyers.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of litigation here in California.
Yeah, and I love my personal injury lawyer friends, but one of my goals is to keep my clients away from them. If I do everything correctly with my clients, hopefully they're never going to be in that position. So the next question after that we ask people is, what assets are there to protect? So some people have, a medium amount of risk, but they're like, I don't have anything, so let them come at me. Good luck to them. But on the other hand, if someone has a house or savings, anything like that, or their spouse has assets that they don't want to be taken in the lawsuit, the more assets there are, the more we're going to want to protect them. So the third question that I always ask that people don't always think about is, what is your comfort with risk? Because some people are totally comfortable with risk and they're like, I have some assets, I have some risk, but I'm not really worried about it. It's been fine this whole time. So I'm just going to go for it and it's going to be okay. Let them come at me and see what happens. But some people, even if they are the person in their pajamas designing websites, are like, you know what, I'm not going to sleep at night unless I know that, that I have limited liability. So either way is fine. That's a personal decision by the business owner. Obviously, I'm a lawyer and I see all the stuff that can go wrong. So I tend to be pretty risk averse and recommend it when possible. But it's a decision for everyone to make individually. If we decide that they do need limited liability, then we can talk to them about the limited liability entities that they can choose from, like LLCs or corporations.
And I think in our practices, especially, we are planning for the worst and hoping for the best.
Absolutely.
So, so I get questions from clients about insurance. So is insurance sufficient to limit their liability? Well, it doesn't limit their liability, but it would pay out if they were liable for something?
So insurance is different from limited liability. And I do recommend having both, even if you have limited liability, because the insurance really acts as the first line of defense. So if someone sues you, hopefully the insurance just covers it and you don't have to pay anything out of pocket, whether it's coming from your business or your personal bank account. And that's great. But in the case that insurance doesn't cover the whole thing or doesn't cover it at all, we want to have that limited liability in place as the secondary shield, really, to protect your personal assets. So if you don't have a limited liability company, definitely have insurance. But even if you have an LLC or a corporation, I think it's still really important to have good insurance too, because the goal is to not have to pay anything at all. Better to have insurance to cover it and have the limited liability as the second in line to protect you.
Absolutely. And is there anything else that people should consider?
Yeah, there's a lot of other things to consider. That's kind of question number one, and it's a big one. But there are other things we would walk through with you if you're figuring out what type of business you should be. So, and a lot of these are things that you're also talking to people about when they're designing their estate plan. So what are their long-term life goals? Do they want to just sell this business in a few years? Do they want it to be a family business and pass on to their kids? What are the long-term goals for the business? Do they want a franchise? Do they want to go public? Do they want to give stock options to their employees? Or do they want to just have it be a one-person show or keep it small or in the family? All those things are going to make a difference in what type of entity they should be. And another big one is, what are your plans for ownership? Is it just going to be you? Are you going to have partners? Are you planning on bringing on partners in the future? Do you want investors? That's also going to make a big difference. And finally, taxes is really the other really big one too. A lot of these entities are going to provide different tax benefits or detriments, and it's something you should always talk to a good CPA about as well, in addition to your lawyers. But you need to know what the tax consequences are going to be before you form an entity, because depending on your life goals and your business goals, you're going to want the taxes to match that.
Absolutely. And so a lot of people ask me this question, and I'm sure ask you the question about estate planning, but can people do this on their own, or should they hire a lawyer?
Good question. So, I mean, as we've touched on briefly just in the last couple of minutes, there are a lot of factors involved in figuring out what type of entity you should be. So I think it's a good idea to have a lawyer help you. There are plenty of people who do it online, and there are lots of services that offer it for pretty cheap. And, a service will technically get the job done. You can file something online and an entity will be created for you. But what those services are not going to do is tell you if you're even making the right decisions to begin with. So I've seen a lot of clients who come in with the wrong entity 10 years later, and they've been paying too much in taxes for years, or they're having a partnership dispute and there's something that easily could have been prevented if they had customized documents and they just didn't know. And I've even seen people who thought they had formed an entity online and didn't, because they didn't sign the documents or they didn't know that they didn't finish the process, and they've gone sometimes for years without even realizing they don't have the entity they thought they did. So the other part of this is these websites make you feel like you have a customized document, but it's really not. They're really trying to make it a one-size-fits-all document, but there's no two businesses who are the same and no two people are the same. Plus, even if it started off accurate, your business changes over time and you change over time. And so, so we find that it ends up often being more expensive to try and fix these documents that people have created and are bad than just get one done from scratch that's actually tailored to you and your business. So that's really a lot of what my business is about. Is it's so much easier and cheaper and less stressful to get it right from the beginning and prevent the problems than try to solve the problem after it happens. So our goal is to make sure that you know your business is safe and your family's assets are safe, so you can focus on your business and not have to worry about whether your documents are actually right and not have to worry about getting sued.
I feel like you were just saying what I say to people about estate.
Yeah, yeah. And unfortunately, it's one of those things that people often don't realize is a problem until it's too late. And that breaks my heart. I hate seeing that. If they had just come to me 6 months earlier, we could have prevented that problem. And there's not a lot you can do after the fact. So
Absolutely.
better to, I consider it an investment.
Sure. And what makes you guys different than other?
Yeah, I tried to create the law firm that I would want to work with. So there are a lot of things we really try to do differently. And first of all, I mean, we just talked about customized documents. All the documents we make are completely customized to you and your needs. Another thing we do differently is a team-based approach, because I really try to go out of our way to give you the experience, the customized experience you deserve to get everything done as quickly as possible and be as approachable and accessible and efficient as we can be for you. So it's not just me working on your document, and it's not just a paralegal working on your document. We're all working together to make sure you get every aspect of it that you need. And another thing that is really important to me is that we don't believe in surprises at my firm, because I hate surprises, at least with business. I want to know how much something's going to cost. I want to know when I'm getting it. I want to know when I'm going to have to pay. And so we do most of our work flat fee when we can. And if we can't do it flat fee, we do it on an hourly basis, but run the hours regularly and give you updated estimates of how much it's going to cost. So you don't get that surprise bill, and you don't become afraid to ask us questions because you don't want to get billed in the mail later for sending us an email that you didn't realize you were going to get charged for. So a lot of what we do is really about education and accessibility. I want you to know when you need me and when you don't need me. I want to know when you need someone else. And I want you to know what you can do yourself and what you shouldn't do yourself, and why we're doing the things we're doing, not just like, you know, you're going to send me a bunch of money and I'm going to send you this document and you don't even know what it's for. So we try to be really approachable and communicative so people understand why what we're doing is important and why they need it. And one of the things we're proud of is just being as transparent as possible with how much it's going to cost and why it's important and everything that's going on. So part of that too is just trying to be responsive with everybody. I know one of the main things that people complain about to the state bar is lawyers not returning phone calls and emails. And so we try to return every single email and phone call within a business day, whenever we can.
Very good. And so once people have created these entities, is there anything they need to do to maintain them?
Yes, good question. And one I'm glad to talk about, because a lot of people will come to us at the beginning and we never hear from them again. And I like to make sure people at least understand what they should be doing, even if they're not getting our help to do it. So when I'm talking about this, I am talking about limited liability companies like LLCs and corporations. So there are things you need to do to keep that limited liability in place. You can't just form the entity and then treat it like it's just an extension of you and expect to get the benefits of that limited liability. So we recommend, so it's mandatory for corporations, optional but highly recommended for LLCs, that you have annual meetings at least once a year, but sometimes more often than that if it's appropriate. So in these meetings, all you're really talking about is anything that's outside the daily scope of business. So, so anything big that's happened in the last year or coming up in the next year that you know should be documented, just write it down and say you vote, vote on it if you have partners, and sign it, and you're good to go. And the purpose of this is to just make a paper trail showing that you're treating your business as a separate entity from you. Because if you get sued and you get brought into court, the first thing the person suing you is going to try to do is take away your limited liability so they can take your personal assets. That's what's called piercing the corporate veil, which people have probably heard that term before. So having these meetings, keeping these records, keeping minutes and resolutions is going to be really good evidence in court that you're taking your business very seriously and you're running it like a business, and it's going to keep that limited liability in place. Otherwise, what's the point? It's just going to be taken away, and you spent all this time and money for nothing. So another thing people don't always realize they need to do is just file what's called a statement of information with the California Secretary of State. It's every 2 years for an LLC, every 1 year for a corporation. That's kind of just updating your contact information with the state so they know where to find you if you do get sued. So,
and do you have to do that even if nothing and you haven't moved or you have the same contact information?
Yes. So anytime you change contact info, you have to update that. If nothing's changed, you still have to do it every year or two. And there's just a box you check that says nothing's changed. It's pretty easy.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And so for business owners who are alone, right? It's just one person.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really have a meeting. You just kind of write this down.
Yeah. So that's me. I have a meeting with myself once a year, every January, make some coffee and I fill out my minutes. And yeah, that's exactly it. Even when you have partners, you don't have to have some formal meeting where you're in a boardroom and taking, saying yay or nay. You can do it in writing. You can email it to each other. That's perfectly fine. We want to make sure your documents say that you're allowed to do that, but our documents always say you're allowed to do that unless there's a reason you want it to be formal. So yeah, you can definitely do that. It's not as complicated and scary as it sounds.
Absolutely. So it sounds like, people will set these up and then they forget about it. Life gets in the way. Everybody's really busy, right? And so the idea is you've spent the money and time to set this up so that you are having that liability protection or limited liability, and then you ignore it or forget about it.
Yeah.
You've just opened that door. So
yeah, exactly. And so that's another really good reason to have a business lawyer who's a part of your team, because even if it's not necessarily a complicated thing, I think you and I have both seen that it's not what's on people's minds. You're busy. You have things to do. You're running a business. So that is something that a lot of people really like having a lawyer do for them. And we have a lot of clients that we just do that for annually, and they don't even have to think about it. We just do it and we send it to them, and everything is up to date and their limited liability is safe.
That's perfect.
Yeah, because again, this is one of these situations where it's a lot easier to prevent the problem than to fight it in court later. So if that's the way it's going to get done, then get it done. It's definitely a worthy investment to save you the tens of thousands of dollars in court later on.
And you mentioned something that I hadn't thought about. I always think of like an outside person suing you for something, right? And so I think a lot of people will have businesses with, maybe they even work out of their house, but they have an employee. And so if you are breaching your duties, even without realizing it, the employment laws are so supportive of the employee here that could be opening a door that you just never think about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Having even a single employee makes your potential risk many times greater over and over and over again. Yeah. The amount of employment laws that there are is just astronomical, and people break them all the time without even realizing it. So that's a whole other video we could do.
I know.
Is all the ways people can get sued. But yeah, that's actually one of the triggers where I recommend an LLC to people, is if they're going to start hiring employees for the first time, because the risk just goes through the roof automatically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what should you discuss with your estate planning attorney?
Quick, I forgot to talk about some other stuff really quick. Can I go back?
Absolutely.
So I did want to also mention, we had talked about the things that you should do that you have to do in order to keep your limited liability in place. But there's other things I see business owners forgetting to do all the time that are really important. Okay. So one is some of the documents we help people create are their operations, internal documents, like their bylaws, their operating agreement, their buy-sell agreement. So these documents are the ones that really govern how your business is run, and they really help protect you. And this is also where we're putting in the stuff that goes along with their estate plan. What's going to happen to their business if something happens to them. And while it's not mandatory to update these annually, unless you say it is in your bylaws or operating agreement. It's really important to look at these super regularly. I think at least once a year, because again, your business is changing, your goals change, your life changes. So maybe someone got married and you want to have, you want to update your documents that way, or maybe you want to change ownership, or the value of your business has dramatically changed. Your documents need to be updated accordingly, because maybe an LLC isn't the right entity for you anymore, or maybe it's time to switch from a sole prop to an LLC, and you don't want to waste opportunity. You don't want to spend too much money in taxes. You don't want to open yourself up to liability because you just were too busy to think about it. So, and as your business changes, your estate plan might also need to change too. So that brings us to your question.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap between business planning and estate planning, which is why we decided to talk to each other in this video to begin with, because I'm asking you questions all the time that my clients are asking, and vice versa. And so when I had the questions that people ask me about their estate plan that I think they should also, when they're sitting talking to you about, one of the things that comes up a lot is they're working on a trust with you, and their business, they don't think about their business as an asset. It's a thing that they own. And we need to make sure that their business is treated accordingly and taken care of in their estate plan. So we'll talk more. We're doing another video where I'll be asking you questions. So in that video, which we'll link to below, you're going to go a little bit more into that. But one of the things that you talk about a lot is some estate planners will set it up that where the business looks like it's in the trust, but it hasn't actually been put into the trust, funded into the trust. So that's something that I am on the lookout for, and someone talking to their estate planner should ask to make sure that the business is actually in the trust. And then you and I can work together to make sure the business documents and the estate planning documents work together and do what they're supposed to do. So likewise, as there's more business assets, we need to make sure that all the assets are accounted for in the estate plan that you've set up. Ownership changes, that's another one they should talk to you about. And again, just making sure everything is documented on both ends, the estate planning end and the business end. So they actually work together. So if it ends up in court, either in a business lawsuit or something happens to the client and their stuff is going through probate, the things happen that the person wants to happen. So more detail on that will be in the other video.
Stay tuned. Well, if you have anything else to add, feel free. Otherwise, how do people contact you?
Yeah, so there's our contact info up on the screen right there. Basically, anything you need from us, you can find on our website. So you can make an appointment with us directly on our website, which is aharonibusinesslaw.com. We also have a newsletter we send out about once a month, just with articles about business, employment, and IP law, and reminders to do your minutes and your meeting and look at your documents. And so that also you can sign up on our website if you want to. We have a YouTube channel where we're going to have this video, but we also put other videos about everything to do with your business. So that's linked on our website too. And we're pretty present on social media, so people can find us wherever they like to hang out. But like I was saying earlier, we do like to really focus on education. So I like to spend a lot of time writing articles and making videos that will be useful to people so they can learn whatever they want to learn on their own and then come to me when they have questions or need help.
Very good. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
You do such a great job.
Oh, thank you.
And we're excited to push it out there to all of the people we know. And I guess that's it.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. This was really fun.
Of course. Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.